Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm very excited to be here with you, though not live due to some scheduling challenges. Unfortunately, this is a video, not me live, but you can reach me with all my information there at the bottom, and we can take this conversation beyond, I guess, time and space. But first of all, let me thank you all for being here on day three. I want to thank Dr. Okwe for inviting me to be part of this sort of great group of folks that I've been talking to you for the last day three of three. I always like the fact that he says he's going to do something and then he goes ahead and plans these big things. And so I'm excited to be here as part of it. My name is Lekan. I'm a sort of founder of a company called F3. We call F3, it's called F3 because we focus on founders, funders, and friends. It was born out of my own personal experience. F3 basically brings these three different roles together. That's why our logo, you'll see it in a second, is kind of this ball, this ball that is tied together. Because we think when you mix an ecosystem of founders, funders, and people who support startups, you can really do some amazing things. It was born out of my own experience as someone who has played all three roles, right? As a founder, trying to figure out how do I get out of my head and really articulate what I'm trying to build and then focus on actually building the product and getting it out to customers. Then funders, as a small-time angel investor and one that's trying to grow my angel investing sort of opportunities, I needed a platform that would help me really vet opportunities and then connect to other angel investors because it tends to be a team sport, angel investing, and other forms of capital for startups tend to be somewhat of a team sport and a network thing where you've got to meet the right people, get connected to the right people, figure out what the right type of funding is and all of this stuff. So, and then the third is I've been startup curious for many years. And in my journey in becoming someone who understands startups, you go through different phases. First, you try to just understand what they are, how the deals work, how you can contribute with your own skills. And so we at F3, we also onboard a lot of people who can help startups, whether you're in a big company and you want to be the first customer to those startups, or you're somebody with a very unique skill that wants to sort of lend their hand to a certain type of startup that fits your skill. We help onboard those folks as well, including people who are thinking about becoming founders but haven't necessarily done it yet but might want to work in a company. We help those folks as well. And so F3 is really this sort of ecosystem, but we focus on what we call undiscovered talent from overlooked places. So I'm talking to you today from that perspective. I'm going to talk about sort of how investors look at opportunities. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to focus on starting your startup, but really jump into how you can leverage these new tools that are available to really kind of accelerate what you can do with your startup. And maybe a little bit less on kind of that ecosystem, but hopefully it's going to be a useful conversation. Before I jump in, I'd like to mention I also work full-time at a big tech company, Google. And whenever I talk to groups like this, I always like to let people know I work there. Sometimes I mention their products. No one is putting me here to kind of shill or sell their products to you today. I mention some of their products just in passing because I love working there and I love some of these products, but nobody is really, I'm not here on behalf of Google. I'm here on behalf of Lekan and F3. But anyway, I like saying that just to kind of clear the point. And then the final disclaimer before I really jump in is that I'm a guy on the internet in a small little video window giving you some tips and tricks on how to build your startup. I always tell founders, listen to everything, take it all in, and then throw half of it away and only use the things that make sense for you. I don't know your business. I have not really I've not really kind of gone in and really understood it to know what you see. And so you be the judge of what makes sense for your business. But hopefully, if you think F3 can be helpful, definitely take my information, reach out to me at any point, especially since I can't be here live to answer questions after the session. All right. So with that preamble, Dr. Okwe, I'm going to go ahead and jump in, and I'll probably just power through the whole thing and then reiterate some information at the end, maybe if it's helpful, how people can get in touch with me. All right, so with that, let me sort of reset. My goal, right, is really to um, help you interrupt maybe your thinking a little bit and just share maybe one side of the table of how investors like to think about startups. I want to start there and then I'll jump back into sort of what that means for a founder. So, how investors think. I've broken this up into sort of three sections, right? Because when you think about sort of from an investor's point of view, if you're a founder today, you want to always be thinking, how does that other person across the table, how do they think? How do they evaluate the things that I'm about to say to them? And really, we think from three perspectives. So I'll start first with things that aren't necessarily about you, but about kind of the thing you're building, and in some cases, things you can't even control. So generally, there are many other topics I could put on this slide, but I want to start with these five. So the market, depending on the type of investor you're talking to, and depending on the type of company you are building, the market becomes really critical. If you're going for venture capital, where everybody's enamored by it today, venture capital, by the nature of what it is, looks for really, really huge markets, right? If you're going to an angel investor who might be investing their own money for opportunities because they want to do well in sort of their local area, they may not need the type of returns venture capital is looking for. You know, I was listening to somebody today who had a 2,000% return on their investment in venture capital. 2,000%. Go do the math on if you put down $50,000 on an investment and you got 2,000% return. I mean, that's life-changing FU money, right? My point is that market matters in those types of deals because the market dictates so much of what happens. So if you're building a company, always know if you're talking to certain types of investors, and we should always, and maybe I should even use the word investor, but you think about capital and the type of capital you're trying to bring to your business. Understand the market you're in and its potential for these returns. How quickly can it scale? What's the overall size of market? Is it a new market? Is it an existing market? There's so many dimensions to it, but think about market. The second is, what's the business model, right? What are you building? The same product in general product or service in with a different model in the market can yield very different things. And having a different model might be what you pick because it's what your customers want. It might be how you pick a model because the type of business you personally want to start. But the point is, model matters as well to investors. Number three is growth, right? If you were building a company that has really, really slow growth in the market, very different than a company that can venture, at these sort of outside scale kind of growth curves. Think about what just happened with the app everybody's enamored with, Thread, right? Where it went from 0 to 110 million in a matter of a weekend, under 10 days, right? You can't do that in every type of business, right? So the growth potential for the business you're building matters to investors. And again, it matters depending on the type of investor or the type of capital. If you're going to a bank, they expect a different type of growth than if you go to an angel investor in technology or a VC in technology, or if you're going to a crowdfunding campaign, right? Depending on the type of investor or capital you're looking for, think about the growth and make sure it's commensurate or it matches what the expectation is. Then timing. One of the biggest things about timing is there's so many dimensions in a startup. One dimension is how long is it going to take for that company to reach maturity, right? To where an investor would get their money back. But timing also, an investor sort of thinks and evaluates your company to really understand kind of, are you hitting the inflection point when the market is ready for what you're building at a time where the market is starting to swell? Are you too early? Are you too late? Neither one is good. There are companies that have died because they were way too late for their market. They started at a time where it was already figured out and the competition was too much. Other people start way too early and they crest before the opportunity has really blossomed, right? Look at the debate we are all having about metaverse. Is it too early or too late? Nobody really knows. And many investors have probably invested in that same thing in different cycles, right? Right now we're in the hype cycle of AI, right? You might argue maybe some of the investments happening in AI right now are too late, or you might say it's early days. and it's just beginning, and it's a 25-year time horizon, and so get in now, right? Who knows what the answer is? We'll figure it out in 20 years. We'll know if all the people making bets today are right or wrong. But just know that timing is a very, very big thing in your company. And then the last one I'll mention here, just the terms. As a founder, it's very good for you to understand what type of deal are you putting in front of people. If you are coming to somebody, make sure what you're putting in front of them makes sense for the kind of investor and the kind of expectation that has already been set, right? You don't want to appear or come off as somebody who is uneducated about the space or doesn't really know, and you're asking for too much or too little, or terms that are just not standard. So terms matter. Again, I picked 5 things here to start the conversation. There's a lot more involved here, but I wanted to start there. Now, like I mentioned, many of these things are not necessarily things you always control as a founder, but I wanted to start here. This next list of things are all about things you control, right? And I'm going through kind of a list of things here, but they're probably more than that too. The ability to execute. One of the most important things an investor wants to know is that this person talking to me, can they actually get this thing done? So ability to execute is like table stakes. A second one is the capacity to learn. Now, a lot of people and some investors will tell you it is your knowledge of the market. I don't believe that anymore. I believe it is more important that you are able to learn fast and that you can really sort of soak things in and then turn it into actionable plans in your startup. And so the capacity to learn, I think, is more important than having deep expertise. Deep expertise matters, but sometimes deep expertise, will paralyze you, will get you to start thinking too much, right? While your ability to learn really is about talking to customers, looking at the market, competitors, the market dynamics, and really figuring out what makes sense, and then tweaking those things quickly and putting it into your product. That gets me to that third point, speed of iteration. Some people will call this product velocity, but your ability to tweak and twist and turn and put something that you just learned into practice, some new feature that you hear from a customer, turn that into something, put it into the product, and get it out the door. That is so magical. When you meet a team who is doing that every day, just look at some of the best products you all use every day. A product that's been sitting that hasn't been updated in 2 years, it's getting stale, versus one where every other week they send you a quick thing. It might be a small feature, but the fact that they communicate with you, they tell you, hey, this new thing is coming. 2 weeks later, they launch it. You love that company and you'll never leave that type of company. And so investors, get really enamored with a startup that's doing that. And so if you're building something, you don't have to build everything on day one. Just think to yourself, pace yourself, but be consistent. That's the biggest thing. The next point here is about the quality of your delivery. There are many ways to think about this. One might just be the clarity in which you understand the problem and turn it into something that's actionable. Another way I look at quality of delivery is just, did this founder really think through the entire customer experience? Are they delivering on the marketing side of what they're doing, on the sales side of what they're doing, on the customer service side of what they're doing, on the execution of the product? Like, their quality of their delivery and thinking through and detail orientation around how they deliver that product or service, to me, is a very good telltale sign of a startup that's going to make it. The next one is about managing your capital. Look, at the end of the day, some investors investing their own money, like me. Other people have a fund already that they're investing other people's money. Regardless of what, nobody wants to see money go to waste. And so your ability to be capital efficient, to take and manage money in the right way in that startup, is a very clear signal of the type of founder that one is talking to. And it's even more important now. And generally the audiences I speak to are what I could, like I said, undiscovered talent from overlooked places. Generally, there isn't a lot of money to go around anyway. And so if you're one of these people who just waste money frivolously, look, not probably for the type of investor I am. Lots of investors in this market are looking at how you manage capital. So think about that as you're kind of presenting what you're doing. The strength of your background. Now, this is one that different people have difference of opinion here. But I like talking about strength of background because it's not just about the individual, right? It's the strength of your background, not necessarily, not about the individual, but it's not necessarily about just who you are, who are your parents, and what's your pedigree. It's also about your ability to have overcome a lot of things. So you might be one of these folks who, I didn't go to the best school, but you being able to describe the things you've overcome in your life that help us understand that, look, this person is going to stick to this thing. They're going to kind of, they're like a dog with a bone, they're going to get this ish done. That kind of person is just as important as someone who has this amazing pedigree, right? So the strength of your background and the relevance of your personal story to the thing that you're building is very helpful to know. And then the last one here is bringing the band back together. Look, startups are a team sport. I actually believe lots of people can start startups as individuals. I tend to do that. I tend to have a nugget of an idea, and I want to validate it a little bit before I bring others on. But as you can see, even with F3 is a team sport. We're bringing founders, funders, and friends together into a big ecosystem. I don't think you can do really important things without other people. So that ability to work with others is important. Doesn't mean you have to have co-founders and everything, especially on day one. But your ability and being able to telegraph that you're good at working with others is important. And a great signal of that is if you can bring back a team you've worked with before. They respect you enough. They believe you enough. They believe in your idea enough to come back together and work for you and work on that idea together. That is a huge signal that tells us not just your ability to work with others, but your ability to actually convince people to leave other important opportunities and to come join you. That's very, very important. All right, so those are two kind of dimensions, right? One more about the market and the dynamics and the opportunity, one about you. And then the final one is what I call intangibles. It's kind of close to your personal story, but it's a little bit different. This one, to me, are kind of the cherry on the cherry on top of the, what do you call it, the icing on the cake, whatever you call it. My point here is that there are these glimmers of magic in people that sometimes you can't explain it, but they are very, when you find it in a founder, you can't always kind of articulate it as a very tangible sort of, this is the reason I must invest, but you can feel it. And when you see that in a founder, sometimes all logic goes out the window and you say, you know what, I just want to be part of this person's story because I know they're going somewhere. It can be stardom or fame, right? That they're just this person that's able to kind of get notoriety. I prefer the second one here around sort of their force of nature. Their personality is a force of nature. They're these people you meet, they're gregarious, they're people want to follow, right? Many people talk about Steve Jobs and his reality distortion field, the ability to kind of convince people to leave things to come join him. Sometimes it is just someone's personality that's just so amazing. Sometimes they're a genius in a very important subject matter. Some of these folks at the center of some of these big AI companies right now are just genius subject matter experts. You listen to them talk, and I watch some of their videos for 2-3 hours, and they're talking about the most boring, mundane thing, but you're just like, this person is a genius. And when you meet founders like that are so deep in a subject matter, sometimes, again, you just know they're going somewhere, and you just need to give them time and space to kind of figure things out. And so those are some of the best opportunities to follow. Similar to that are mad scientists, tinkerers. These are people who may not be subject matter experts, but they actually just get their teeth into something and they figure stuff out. I would put Elon Musk in this category, right? He's not a trained physicist, but look at the companies he's building. These are all really deep, hard technology problems. They're also scientific problems. And he's not necessarily a trained physicist or a scientist or whatever, yet he's running, energy companies, rocket companies, internet companies from space. I mean, you name it, right? In fact, I almost prefer him to focus on that than social networks. But my point is, mad scientists, tinkerers are really interesting, right? Because sometimes they're just they're the best people to kind of, again, watch them and just see the craziness they come up with. And they're, I always talk about genius is everybody taking in the same information, but having a different reaction, having a different sort of motion on how you react to that information. And these mad scientists are often the type that take in what you and I hear and maybe discount, but they see a different vision. And so that's the last point. So 3 ways investors think that you might want to sort of familiarize yourself with, and then ask yourself, what does that mean for what I'm building? All right. So the next dimension I want to talk about is the converse of what scares investors, right? Make sure you don't kind of telegraph these things, and maybe I'll try to be a little quicker on these. So what scares investors? The first one there, pre-PMF. PMF stands for product market fit, right? This is when a product meets a ready market and magic just happens, right? When you launch a product and the customers, even before you finish the product, are begging you to pay for it, they will do crazy things just to get access to your product. That's product market fit, right? And so let's go back to Thread again, right? They put a product out there. Some people got early access, others wanted it. Look at the early days of Clubhouse, right? That's product market fit, where you put something out there and people are just desperate for the product. If you don't have product market fit, it's very hard for investors to get excited about what you're doing. People invest pre-product market fit all the time. I'm just mentioning it scares a lot of investors, not everybody. In order to get to pre-product market fit, one of the signals tends to be revenue. So if you're pre-revenue, or you're not charging yet for your product, or you're not making money yet, that tends to scare investors as well. One of the ways you don't make money is your pre-launch. You haven't actually launched the product yet. It's still a concept. It's still a prototype. It's still an idea. Again, if you're pre-launch, for some investors, they can't get over that curve. They want you to go ahead and launch it and then come back to me and tell me more. For some founders, the problem about not launching is that they're pre-product. They're still very, very early in the idea stage, and they haven't actually started building the product yet. Again, not sure you should be looking for investors unless you've done this multiple times before. So again, if you're pre-product, red flag. And then I call this one sort of pre-conviction. For some investors, if you're not working full-time on the business yet, they don't want to be interested. But for me, I'm not so picky about that. I'm more picky about conviction, that you've decided this is what I'm building, and I want to focus. I don't want to do 50 things at once. I want to focus on this particular problem. I'm in love with this problem, this customer, and I've decided I'm going to go do this. You're not wishy-washy. You're not still thinking about it, all of these things, right? So conviction matters. And so if you're pre-conviction, it's really hard to go find an investor. So I almost look at these things as they build on top of each other. You get conviction, you focus on product. You focus on product, you launch the product. You focus on launching the product, you start getting revenue. You have revenue, you start getting towards product market fit to prove that you've built the right product for the right market. But at the bottom are 3 things, right? The worst thing in the world is to give money to a dreamer. Dreamers are great, they're inspiring, but they don't equal returns for investors. So once an investor hears you as, I'm doing these 50 things, and I've tried this, and I'm doing this, and trying things matter. But you learn, you move on to the next thing, and you keep trying and you iterate. That's important. That's part of doing a startup. But not a dreamer that jumps from like pillow to post and this to that with no plan, no action. And they're just thinking about, oh, in 10 years from now, we will do this. Your startup will be dead before you get there. So dreamers are a very red flag. Now PMS, this is what they call premature scaling. PMS, premature scaling. Just like with dreaming, worrying about when you have 1 million users and building your product so well that it can handle 1 million users, if it takes you too much time, is not valuable. Focus on what gets you to the next step to prove the next thing before you move on. Right? And so too many founders that die early are too worried about scaling before they need to worry about scaling. So don't fall into that trap. Premature scaling doesn't help your company. In fact, many times you will have burned all your resources before you get there. And then the final one there is timing. I talked about it before. Too early, too late, those things don't work. In fact, more startups die from these 3 things: a dreaming founder, premature scaling, and the wrong timing, more than they die because of money or because customers didn't like the product. In fact, they die out of irrelevance. People, when you do those 3 things, you scaled prematurely, and you run out of resources, or your timing is off, or you're dreaming without building. Paul Graham at Y Combinator talks about startups don't die from homicide; they die from suicide. right? Many of these things are self-inflicted wounds. Try to stay away from them. All right, I've told you all the doom and gloom, all the bad stuff. So then how do you build trust with investors? What are the things you should be doing? Let me explain a few. To me, when you want to build trust with investors, the first thing to do is not, don't be too hungry and have a financial plan. What I mean by that is there are, when you talk to a salesperson who hasn't met their quota, it's the end of the month, they're so desperate. They're so desperate to close that deal that they will say anything. You say no 50 times and it's like, well, what if I did this? And what if I did that? And you can tell they're not going to make money on the deal. That's a hungry person. Investors don't actually like those folks. We want you to be gregarious and talk about what you're building and everything, but don't be overzealous and like just give away everything because you're so desperate. And part of that, I see desperation in founders when they don't have financial footing. That doesn't mean everybody here needs to have $1 million in the bank before you start a startup. Far from it. What I'm saying is just know how you pay your bills in the short term so that if you don't close this round this time with this investor, it's not the thing that like makes or breaks you. So the more you have a financial plan, if that is driving Uber while you build your startup in the beginning, or you go to friends and family to get money, whatever it is you have to do to have a financial plan so that you can focus on building the company you need to build in the time frame you need to do it. Be fast about it, but don't be so desperate. The other part here is where I see family relationships start to really, really kind of suffer, is that you didn't have a financial plan. Your significant other isn't on board and you're starting to run out of money, and now you're trying to go fundraise and now you're looking for money rather than actually building the company. Now, and meanwhile, everything at home is falling apart. So all I'm saying is have a plan before you jump into this stuff. This sort of a similar thing to this is not begging. Investors want to jump into an opportunity. You need to actually be selling the opportunity. It sounds crazy if you haven't raised money or people haven't just given you money to start a company and you're like, man, what are you talking about? My point is, people, it's crazy, but people actually want to give people money when they feel like the person doesn't actually need the money, or that they're going to get money from others if I don't give it to them first. That's the deal everybody wants to be involved in, because they can see the money printing machine and they can see the workhorse who's going to print the money for them. And they're just like, man, I need to get into this deal before the next person. In fact, the best startups, investors are begging them to put money into. Be one of those. Don't be one who's begging investors. And the things I said before are how you do that. Last 3 quick points. Do have an opinion. Sometimes investors will ask you questions and argue with you just to better understand, does this person have conviction? So have it. Don't be argumentative. Don't be dismissive. Don't do those things. But have a strong opinion based on reality. Talk to your customers, but have an opinion. Have a point of view, right? Remember in the beginning when I said, take half of what I said and throw it out the door? When you're talking to an investor and they start saying things doesn't matter, smile and nod. Thank you for that. Very interesting points. I will consider it. As soon as you're out of the meeting, throw it out. But in the meeting, be cordial, but have your own opinion. The other part is having a good story. A story doesn't mean you're a great storyteller. Funny enough, I was on Clubhouse this weekend pitching some stuff with F3. I did a horrible job. F3 still has a very good story, but I hadn't really worked on it. I hadn't spent time really packaging that up. And that was a mistake on my part. And I should know better. And so one of the things I want to tell you all is just work on it. Think about how you do that and have different versions of your story. The 2-second version for like you're going out of an elevator. Hey, who are you? What do you do? Give me the very short version. Then there's the version you pitch in front of an investor with a deck. There are other times where you're doing it to a team of people. So have different versions of your story and know which version of the story is about raising money versus telling the product story of like why you built it, and then the customer story of why they should use it. These are slightly different stories. And so have a clear sort of mind about each one, work on it, and have the different stories ready kind of in your tool belt, ready to kind of be used. And then the last one, back to when I was talking about Dr. Okwe, one thing I will tell you about the man is he does what he says what he will say, and he does it. And so one of the biggest things to build trust with investors is just consistency. It's very unlikely that you're building thread from Facebook, and the moment I see it, I'm like, oh my God, I need to go empty my account and give you all my money. Most likely I want to meet you. That's interesting. That's a good first person. I like what they're doing. Let's talk over a period of time. That's most likely what you will encounter. And so most likely you want to build trust over time. So that's it. That's how you build trust with investors. Now, generally, if I was doing kind of a one-on-one talk, what I would do at this point is really start to focus on how you can build your startup. Now, I don't want this to be a 2-3 hour lecture. I want to get to some other topics. And so I put some items here on this. There's probably a curriculum of double or triple of these things that are ways you can actually build your startup. The good news is there are hundreds of videos. In fact, I love all the videos on Y Combinator's website. They have a startup school. Nothing I would tell you is any different than what they're telling you, though we will be teaching a bunch of these things on some of our events at F3 over the next couple of months, from sort of middle end of the summer to into the fall. But look, this stuff exists out there. I'm not adding any new content to this piece, so go out, look for it on YouTube. If you're not familiar, many of you already know some of this stuff, so I want to just sort of acknowledge that this is kind of the next set of things, is to really focus on the kind of the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of building your startup. But I do want to give you kind of the TLDR of whatever you watch on these videos. For me, they come down to a few things. And TLDR meaning too long, don't read, right? 3 things. Important. Launch your startup early. Launch early. If you launch your startup quickly, you can validate, you can learn quickly, you can iterate quickly, and you preserve resources. So many of those things I talked about before come down to launching quickly. If you take 3 years to launch and you run out of money and your significant other wants to divorce you because the family is now broke, you've achieved nothing. You haven't launched, and more importantly, you learned nothing, and now you've lost all of these things. If you launch early, you might figure out that you built the wrong thing, and the world isn't over. You can tweak it and then keep iterating. That's why launching early matters. And then you want to launch often. Too many people think launching means I got to set up the big party, get the t-shirts, invite, all the celebrities I know. In fact, that's the worst thing to do, is to have 50 launches. A launch simply means the product is available to somebody. That's it. In fact, your first launch may not even be one they can log into by themselves. It might not even be the real product, right? I always talk about this. There's a startup called Boom. They are building the modern version of a Concorde jet. Anybody that doesn't know what the Concorde is, it's a jet that was designed at, I want to say mid-70s, sometime like that. And this thing could fly, I think, Mach 1.3, 1.4. So that's faster than the speed of sound. So New York to London in 2.5, 3 hours. Now, all our planes today fly slower than that for many reasons. Well, this founder was a general aviation pilot and decided this is the problem he wanted to tackle. He built that company's first product as a financial model. Think of an Excel or Google Sheets spreadsheet. That's it. That was his first product. And then he went to a Stanford professor to say, listen, I have this idea. Can you look at this financial model? Look at all the things I'm doing in here. Are these all the factors we need to think about? Are these numbers valid? If they are and you think you believe it, then maybe I can go talk to some people for the next stage to say, hey, if this is true, what I put in here, and it's truly possible to build something for these costs, then I might have something here. And so you as a founder, you get to decide what that scope is. And that's what that founder did in a genius way. And I love that. And so he launched that first product as just a financial spreadsheet. Today, he's raised a ton of money. They've built prototypes. Now they're going to start working on the actual jet that many of us will fly in someday. That's how small things become massive things, is to start small, launch early, launch often, and then iterate repeatedly. So no matter what startup advice you have, it comes down to those things to me. All right. I've been ranting for what now? About 35 minutes. I want to switch gears. All these things I've been talking about, to me, changed in the last 18 months. But then I would say this year, 2023, really changed, where magic started to happen. And I'm going to talk about what I mean by magic. The leverage you need to really build your company has really changed. Some Everything I described there before over the last 20 years was going down, down, down in terms of the cost to do it, the amount of effort you needed, the number of people you needed to achieve all of those things I described before. But I would say in the last 18 months, and maybe 2, 3 years if you want to extend it broader, the leverage that you have to kind of beat inertia, to kind of get this thing going and do the things I described at record speed has really, really changed. And what I'm describing are these magical new tools: AI, unique data, automation, and no code. And I believe today that any founder anywhere should be able to build a company for under $1,000 and do the initial product in weeks and months, not years, not months or days. It should be compressed. Smaller amount of money, less people, and get the first product to market. Now, I know that's not every product. That's not, if you're trying to build the next COVID vaccine, it may not be possible. I'll give you that. And if what you're working on is building a house, I might give you that. But I could still argue that you could probably leverage these same technologies to build the initial inkling of validating that idea. So I tell almost any founder today, AI, data, no code, and automation are your leverage. They give you superpowers. And if you think about how to use these things the right way, you can create magic. And to me, magic is literally looking into a screen like this, leveraging these tools, and at some point money shows up in your bank account while you're asleep. The world has never really seen that kind of magic created, or the ability to create that kind of magic democratized to so many people at such low cost and this level of accessibility. And so this is the time to act and use these tools to change your own family tree. Now, I want to focus first on AI. I've shared this slide in a couple of other talks before, but I like using it as a central grounding point to talk about the potential and the opportunity. I won't go into every single one because I'll probably do some video outside of this that I can share back into Dr. Okbe's community about each of these things specifically. But I'll pick a couple. If you think about AI and the ability to sort of marry it with data today, autocomplete is the one we all have probably used the most, where you're typing in your inbox or on your phone and it predicts what's coming next. But you can think about what are all the types of business cases where auto-completing or helping somebody go from empty page to something on the page, how many business processes can you put in place that do that? I can think of 500, right? And so leveraging AI to make sure you fix what they call the cold start problem, where if your customer today has to start from scratch or describe something to you or anything that requires them to do a lot of things before they can actually get into the value, this autocomplete idea is interesting. Copilot or assistant. I'm sure you've thought about a lot of the different use cases for AI that enable you to do that. So just, again, refactor it into, well, I'm building this thing. How can this help my potential customer? Let me leverage it. Or how does it help me in my business become much more efficient? A corollary to that one is the personal tutor, right? I like to think of this one as like my assistant as being the person behind you giving you advice, and the co-pilot is maybe the person beside you. But the personal tutor is the one that you turn to all the time to say, I don't know this thing. I don't want to appear dumb, but can you help me with this thing? And so ask yourself, what is the version of that you could build into your product, or how you leverage that in your company to enable and empower your customers? Summarization. To me, this is one of the most powerful things people don't realize, is that not only do these tools allow you to summarize, they can do more than that. Summarization goes beyond just that word. If you take a lot of these LLMs now, what you can do is not just summarize something in text, but let me give you an example. Let me make it more tangible. So imagine now today you're listening to this talk. This talk is being recorded, right? You could leverage an AI today to cut out all the things I talked about that's not interesting, and prompt it and tell an AI, you know what, these are the things I care about out of his 2-hour talk. give me the 10-minute version and summarize it for me in video. You could translate this thing into audio and then change it to text and say, give me bullet points of this entire talk. There's so many different ways you can think about summarization and what it means and how you can put it into workflows. And so I want you to just be thinking about all of those things in what you're building. Then recombining things. After summarization, you might combine it in unique and new ways and turn it into something different and use it as part of that workflow. Translation. Think of the ability for this talk to be changed into Japanese and French and Hindi and you just think of all the languages that this talk could be translated into literally in a matter of minutes and then deployed into all these different channels. And so how many more people can you reach that way with what you're building? Classification is one of those kind of use cases for AI that we've known about for a long time. Sorting things, right? There's a company that started doing this with trash, right? Using computer vision through cameras to capture trash on a conveyor belt, and then they sort the type of trash. I mean, there are just so many use cases for doing something like that. Prediction, I'll skip that one. You probably have thought of those. Scaling and augmenting. One of the things you can think about with these tools are how many people do I really, think of how many people you can afford in the business you're building today. And then say, if I had no unlimited funds, how many more people would I want? Then ask yourself, how many of those new people that you might want and what tasks they're going to do could I leverage AI for? And then that will get you down a path of figuring out how to kind of leverage it for sort of scaling and automation. I always talk about removing steps. Removing steps is, to me, the mental model for how AI can help you reinvent business processes. So things you had to do before because they just required all of these mundane things, how do you ask yourself, well, how could I just get to the outcome faster? And then think about how AI can help remove those steps and get you there faster. Then automation, while not necessarily AI, but AI combined with automation here, is fascinating. If you think about some of these steps and summarization and things I talked about before, the idea of automating some of those things and maybe having multiple AIs working together is one of the things. And it's actually what we call autonomous agents at the bottom there. And then last point I'll make here about personalization and delight is that everybody thinks AI is all about making things impersonal, removing steps from processes, making less humans involved, whatever. Actually, AI might be your best way to personalize at scale. So how could you think about collecting the most relevant contextual information on your customer, packaging that up, and then delivering it through your product and service in a way that makes them feel special? The example I gave the last time I talked about this was years ago. I went to the Wynn Casino in Las Vegas, and when I showed up, they had printed my name on on the room key, and it had Mr. Bashua. I felt important. I felt like a big dog. And I get to my room. I see that they had set up some things there, and that morning I ordered some tea, and with my breakfast, and I specifically asked for brown sugar, and thought nothing of it. Years later, I returned back to that same hotel, the Wynn, and somebody remembered to put brown sugar in my room. I was dumbfounded. I was amazed. This is why I keep telling the story almost 8 years later, because that's the kind of personalization that you can build today to make your customer feel special. Think about how you could do that and leverage these tools to make it happen. I'm going to skip the things at the bottom. You guys can read about multimodal, multi-model, and autonomous agents. There's a tool that Dr. Okpe keeps talking about that he loves called marketing blocks. They are leveraging multimodal and multi-model to achieve what they're doing, which is to bring together a bunch of different tools under one umbrella. And so think about how you could leverage those in your business. All right, before I go, I want to mention a couple of AI tools. Here's a full list of them. The first one there is Google Bard, which is by Google. Full disclosure, I work there. I think I talked about that before. ChatGPT, you all know that one. Perplexity, try it. It's a different type of LLM that you might find interesting. Anthropic has one called Claude. In fact, just yesterday, we're talking on, today's July 12th. So July 11th, they released Claude version 2. It is very interesting. Their context window, so the window of things you can, its memory, its short-term memory is essentially I think OpenAI right now is doing 8,000 characters. They go to 100,000 tokens, not characters, tokens. And so the context window is much bigger, which is fascinating. You can upload documents to it. So you could literally put in a full book and say, now I want to ask questions of the AI on that book and use it that way. So it's pretty powerful. You should think about looking at it. Again, get ideas from it and then figure out. They also have an API that you can use to build your own product. I always talk about Audio Pen. I love this tool because it helps me think through ideas. It helps me get my ideas out in audio. Then it rewrites the audio and saves it to a place where I can go back and look at what was I trying to say about this thing. My rambling statements are clarified for me and rewritten, and I can tell it to do it in bullet point format or do it in prose. It's a really useful tool. The founder is doing things I said here, iterating on the product very often. I love that tool. But I want you to check it out mainly because it will give you an idea of how you can think about creating these magical, unique experiences that might be niche, but could be really valuable for you. Poe, I mentioned because it's one where you can compare a lot of these different AI tools, these LLMs, and really kind of compare each one of them and see the differences between them. It's really useful. Cognosis is one that gets to what they call chain of thought thinking, and really the idea of building agents. So rather than like prompting these LLMs one time, if you go to Cognosis, you get an idea of what happens if I could sort of batch a bunch of these different tasks together and then have the AI go do them without necessarily confirming with me and then packaging up a response. And so you might be able to think through more of your processes and build something like that. Pi, many people have probably talked about it. You've probably heard about it. I like to mention it here because I think they're building kind of this unique personal assistant. And rather than most of the AI tools where you are asking it questions, in this case, it's reversing it. It's asking you a bunch of questions. And I think if you play with it, I think you'll get some ideas around, well, what if I did that for my customers, right? It gets to this personalization thing we were talking about, right? How could I get to them and ask them questions in ways that make sense and are relevant for them without having to build 1,000 decision trees, right? That's something to look at. And then I mentioned marketing blocks here. I know Dr. Okwe loves that tool, but the reason I mention it here is they're using different types of AIs pulled together, right, in a unique way to deliver a solution. So I want you to kind of look at all these tools, not because you have to use them, but just to get ideas and play with them so you kind of really think through all the stuff he was talking about. How might I then take these particular tools and leverage either them specifically or tools like them, or leverage their APIs to build your own product. All right, so I'm going to shift gears into no code. For me, I've always realized that there are lots of people who want to build startups who take everything I've said and said, yeah, but my issue has always been I don't know how to get started because I don't know how to code. And therefore, I end up having to go pay a bunch of people money that, and they've taken me for a ride. I've spent $20,000. I still don't have a product. It has been a barrier, and I acknowledge that. But part of why I said things have changed over the last 3-ish years, maybe a little bit before that, but definitely this year, is because this is becoming less and less a barrier. Not suggesting you can build Google without code, but I'm suggesting you can get started with your idea without code, validate something, maybe even make your early revenue, and then build more things. But you can certainly get started. And I also want to mention sort of a mentality here, a mindset. I think some of us in the tech world have done a disservice of making this thing seem so esoteric, so magical, that only a unique few people can do it. Hogwash. Anybody can learn these principles, and I'm going to teach you the very basics right here today. And I also want to acknowledge something as well, which is that I want to acknowledge that building these things, if what you're looking at here, I call syntax. It's code, but it's really an abstraction on top of what the machine or the computer is actually thinking. And part of what's important about that is the computer thinks in ones and zeros, right? What you're looking at there in the past was always, what has always stopped you was this coding thing. But really, all of this is really just trying to convert a language that's more human, which you might say is not human to you, but more human readable to something that a computer understands. Now, what's interesting with no code and even AI on top of it is that it's just doing the same thing. It's just another computer language that's being converted to this. Not exactly, but I'm trying to simplify a context here, right? Because, for example, those zeros you see at the bottom of my screen in white, that is my name in binary. There was a time in which you would have had to think about that, and that's what you would have communicated to a computer in order to write my name. Nobody does that anymore. Well, today, imagine when you just talk to one of these LLMs and you just say Lekan Bashua, right? And that's what the computer is taking from what you said. My point here is that don't feel bad if you weren't a coder before. Leverage it today. So, without belaboring the point, let me jump in here. This model is something that has existed for probably 30 years in software development. And the idea is to think about three components of whatever you're building: model, view, controller. We call it the MVC model. Basically, if you think to yourself, I have my phone in my hand, there's the UI, the thing that you touch. When you press a button on your phone, that's the thing you look at. When things change on Facebook or Thread, that's what you see. That's the view, the UI. Then there's the data model. This is kind of the structure of how the data is structured in the back end, how it's collected, how it's organized, how it's modified, how it changes. That data model is what powers it. So a data model would say, I have, in my data backend, I have an image, I have a name, I have a password. There are all these things. And then the controller is really how you stitch these two things together. It's the logic in your application. If I do this, then this thing happens. You can think of them as if-then statements. If I do this, then that thing happens, right? So these three concepts are, if you can break down what you're trying to build or the app you're envisioning for your business or the website into these three things. What does my user have to see and touch? What is the data that would have to feed that thing? And then ultimately, what's the logic that would make those things happen? If I do this, what do I actually want to happen? Let me give you an example. So I'm going to show you one of these no-code tools, and I want you to kind of look at, as I go through these screens, look at what you're seeing up there. They have data, layout, actions. Data is your data model. Layouts is the UI. Actions is the control. So in this no-code tool, they're basically taking the MVC model and they've made it more human. So here's an application that's built without code. It's an inventory, management tool. Again, if you think about kind of what I'm talking about, this is the layout. This is the view. This is kind of the things you're seeing. They have a different view in the application. If you notice at the bottom there, you have products, you have others, you have warehouse, catalogs and users, right? So those are different views and they present different types of information. But this is just the layout, the UI, that shows you different views, right? So this is a user view. It shows an image of somebody. And as you're doing this, start thinking what comes next, right? Remember we talked about this is the layout. What comes next after layout, right? Is data model, right? So this is the backend that powers what we just looked at. This is your spreadsheet. It's really a database, but let's call it a spreadsheet to make it easier. As you notice, you have name, description, price, SKU, catalog, right? Stock level, photo, name, SKU, barcode. They're all these pieces of data that are needed to present what we were showing before, right? So when we get to the user one, might be the easiest one for you to see. But this is now your data model, right? This is the users tab. As you notice, there's a name of the user, there's an email address, there's their photo, there's their role, right? So just like you saw before, when we got to the user thing, you had everybody in a circle with their picture, they had a name, they had an email address. This is the data model that powers that view. And so that's kind of how you start thinking about this, right? This is how you write software without coding. It's still the same concepts, just broken down into something visual. Now we get to the actions. What's really powerful about this entire thing we've been talking about is that today, you don't necessarily have to write every single rule. In fact, a lot of the secret in software development is a lot of why these companies are growing so fast and so quickly is they're accessing what we call APIs. APIs allow you to sort of understand a set of rules on how to, from your application to talk to another one. And then you have to build a little bit of connection between them, and then you can pull or send information between these things. And so a lot of these new no-code tools actually have now buried in the ability to access a lot of things. This particular one, and I'll show it to you what it is later, is using OpenAI already, Google Cloud Vision, push notifications. You can use Microsoft stuff. You can use Twilio, which is like a telephony thing for sending SMS messages and stuff like that. These are all already plugged in. And so with a little bit of rules, hey, if my customer loads a picture of themselves and they want to convert that picture to a dog version of themselves, I want to take this picture, send it to OpenAI's Vision API, and process it, come back, and then I want to store it in the section that I've put under user profile called dog picture of human. And you can do that without code. And all you do is use a bunch of, just think of kind of business workflow diagrams that you're connecting to each one. And then with each one, you click inside and you add a little bit more context. And that's all. So you literally can sit there and build an application in hours by just thinking of what I need to do, break it into these 3 steps. Okay, what is the control or logic? What is the UI or view? And then ultimately, what is my data model? And let the system figure out what the code or binary is under all of that. You don't need to worry about those things. And so that's where we've gotten to today. Now, let me do this. These are a couple of different no-code tools. I won't spend a lot of time. I'm approaching an hour. I want it to be done in 45 minutes, but as my wife says, you can't shut up your mouth. You just keep talking. So let me just leave these here. You can Google them. There's some of the ones that I keep. I collect a lot of tools. There are just a bunch of them that I keep. I use Glide a lot. I use Software. I've used Stacker. I've used Adalo. And they all serve slightly different purposes. Some are better at some things than others. As an example, if you look at Software is really good if you marry it with a tool called Airtable. They really work well together. You can build a lot of things, more websites very quickly, though they are supporting mobile today. Glide is really powerful. I like it. I think it's the more beautiful one of all of them. Stacker is good if you're building a tool for a customer as like internal tools. Flutterflow is a very, very interesting one. Flutterflow and the one right beside it called DraftBit. Those ones let you build like what I just showed you in Glide. And yes, the thing I just showed, by the way, is Glide. You can build things with Flutterflow and DraftBit where you build these tools, you build with these tools, and then they output standard code. Right? And so you could think of that, if you're building something, you're like, yeah, I want to get started, but eventually I want to hire developers or hire a co-founder that's technical and bring them onto the team. You could start with one of these tools and know that what's underlying it is standard code that can then be ported to a different system later and then built as standard software. And so you have that sort of dexterity with some of these tools where you don't have to be locked into sort of a platform. So I put a bunch of words on this screen. For a different day to get into the weeds of what they all are. Just know that if you spend a little bit of time, go on YouTube, watch a bunch of videos, you'll see stuff here. But we'll also start teaching a bunch of these things to help people kind of go from that 0 to 1, like I said, through F3 in the next couple of months. All right. I want to kind of wrap up here, but I'm showing you my desktop. When I open up any browser window on my computer, this is what I see. This is probably, I don't know, 100, 200 different tools that are out there. I'm a connoisseur of tools. On my phone, I probably have 5,000 apps that I've tried, right? I try everything. I'm a product guy. That's my job. So I use, I test out a lot of these things. But what I'm suggesting to you all is to not do what I do. I track over 3,000 AI no-code automation and data tools. Part of what we're building at F3 is a database of these tools that we can then help match back to what you actually need for the company you're trying to build so we can help you be more efficient. You don't need to do that. What you need to do is figure out the few tools you need to get started, right? I share that with you because some people I've seen get to this point where all they are is a collector of all these tools and they never do anything with them. So know what your outcome is, know what you're trying to get to, and don't be a collector of tools, be a doer, a user of tools, maybe is a better way to say it. So with that, I'm kind of formally ending here. What I hope has been helpful is that I've kind of added some creativity to your thinking. I've helped you maybe with a couple of light bulb moments and help you sort of maybe think through this venture that you're interested in starting. Of course, I'm assuming you want to have a venture because if you've listened to this whole thing and you didn't have one idea that you think you can monetize, you've missed the entire point of why Dr. Okwe set this whole thing up and why I wanted to come speak. Because I believe this is the time for every single one of us to think of a unique problem that's unique to us and go do something about it. In ending, I want to reiterate, stop thinking, start doing, not tomorrow, today. Don't walk, run, and go build your idea. And once you figured it out, ship early, ship often, and then iterate. Keep doing it again and again and again. I put this slide here because I like to talk about what I call doctors that smoke. Don't be one of those people. You have the secrets, you understand the code now. And so nobody's gatekeeping. Everybody here in this sort of workshop over the last 3 days is sharing with you the information. You have the knowledge. Now go do something about it. Don't be a doctor that knows I shouldn't smoke and yet they smoke. We're all guilty of it at some point in our lives. My point to you is don't let this be one of those times. You have the knowledge, go do something about it. With that, I want to end talking about this gentleman. His name is Clarence Avant. He was a gatekeeper. They called him the Black Godfather. If you actually go on Netflix, you can find a documentary about this man's life. He knew everybody. Everybody knew him is more important. This man, in fact, this is a slide showing just some of the celebrities that he knows. He knew presidents, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Jay-Z, Puffy, you name it. Everybody knew this man. Everybody was close to him. And he was the gateway to a lot of things. I believe a lot of the people who have come together in this program are trying to exhibit the behavior of this man, which is to leverage what they know, their network and their skill, and channel it as a way to open up doors for all of you all. With that, I want to just come back to explaining why his story is so powerful for me at F3. Our logo here is about putting a bunch of things together and saying you create magic when you bring the right sort of resources together. We at F3, our goal is to do what Clarence did, but rather being one individual is to do it through a network of people. A lot of the folks that have presented to you in this group are some of the people I've started to meet that we want to bring into what we're doing at F3 in service of all of you founders. And so if you think what we're doing can be helpful to you and you think some of the things I talked about were useful, please reach out. This is our temporary website. It's joinf3.co. It's temporary, but we're getting started now. The real site will be f3.app. The number 3.app, but go to joinf3.co right now. You can kind of signal interest, sign the form, and we'll get back to you. But with that, I want to finally end. I said I was ending 5 minutes ago, and I kept talking. Dr. Okwe, thank you very much for having me. For you all in the audience, thank you for even listening this far. I apologize I couldn't be there live in person. Feel free to reach out. If there are questions I can help answer, I'll do that. I'm on every social channel. I'm just Lekan, my first name, B for my last name, Lekan B at everything. Facebook, Twitter, Threads, you name it, I'm there. So with that, I really want to end finally. Thank you all for having me. Enjoy the rest of the sessions. I hope this has been helpful to you. Thank you.